Good evening. This is Capital Talk. We begin with what is arguably the most significant and consequential story developing right now, not just for this region, but for the entire world. According to a report published by CBS News, President Donald Trump has been briefed by his top national security advisors that the United States military has the capability and the readiness to launch a strike against Iran as early as this coming Saturday. Let us be absolutely clear. The president has not yet made a final decision. No order has been signed. No green light has been given. But what this report tells us is that the option is now firmly on the table, the military is ready, and the clock may be ticking. This report comes in the immediate aftermath of 2 rounds of nuclear negotiation, one held in Muscat, Oman, and the other in Geneva, Switzerland, both of which have been officially described by senior American officials as failures. The White House has not minced words. Officials have made clear that Iran did not come to the table in good faith, that the Islamic Republic has refused to make any meaningful concessions on its uranium enrichment program, and that the path of diplomacy is narrowing fast. The White House, however, has been careful to maintain its public messaging. Spokespersons have reiterated that President Trump views diplomacy as his first and preferred option in any international crisis, and that Iran would be, in their words, very wise to pursue a deal with this administration. The reference to Operation Midnight Hammer, the military operation in which the United States previously struck and obliterated key Iranian nuclear facilities, was also invoked by administration officials, serving as a pointed reminder of what American military power is capable of delivering. The question now being asked in capitals around the world is simple. Is this the end of diplomacy with Iran? And if so, what comes next? Inside Iran, the answer to that question appears to already be in motion. The Islamic Republic is not waiting passively. Military preparations are underway on multiple fronts simultaneously, painting a picture of a country bracing for a potential confrontation. At sea, Iranian naval forces are currently conducting joint military exercises with Russian naval units in the Sea of Oman and the northern Indian Ocean. The involvement of Russia in these drills is significant and should not be overlooked. It signals a deepening of the strategic partnership between Moscow and Tehran at a moment of extreme geopolitical tension, and it raises serious questions about the extent to which Russia could become involved should a broader conflict break out. At the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow but enormously strategic waterway through which a significant portion of the world's oil supply passes every single day, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps has launched its own separate military exercises. More alarmingly, Iranian authorities have announced a temporary partial closure of the strait, citing what they describe as security reasons. Any disruption to shipping through the Strait of Hormuz has immediate and far-reaching consequences for global energy markets, and this move will be watched extremely carefully by governments and markets alike. On land, newly obtained satellite imagery tells its own story. Construction and fortification work is actively underway at several key Iranian military installations. The images show the burying and hardening of tunnel entrances, the reinforcement of underground facilities in mountainous terrain, and new construction at sites in multiple strategic locations across the country, including areas previously struck during Operation Midnight Hammer. The message from Tehran appears deliberate. We are rebuilding. We are hardening, and we are ready. Beyond Iran's own military preparations, there is the question of what its network of regional allies and proxy forces might do in the event of an American strike. This is a question that keeps Israeli military planners awake at night, and it is one we will be exploring in depth with our panel of experts shortly. Reports are emerging that Iran is actively pressuring certain allied groups in the region to prepare to join the conflict should hostilities break out. Israel has taken these reports seriously and has delivered direct and unambiguous warnings. Any group that chooses to intervene on Iran's behalf will face a response that is, in Israel's own words, very painful. On the northern border, ceasefire violations by Lebanese armed groups have continued, and the Israeli Defense Forces have responded with fresh strikes targeting weapons storage facilities, missile launcher positions, and military infrastructure used by the Hezbollah organization. Israel remains on high alert along its northern border and has made clear it is prepared to respond decisively should Hezbollah choose to open a second front. We turn now to Gaza, where a significant diplomatic development is unfolding in Washington at this very hour. President Trump is hosting the inaugural meeting of what his administration has called the Board of Peace, a newly formed international body designed to coordinate the post-war reconstruction, aid distribution, and long-term governance of the Gaza Strip. More than 50 nations are represented at this gathering, making it one of the most significant multilateral diplomatic events focused on Gaza since the beginning of the conflict. The stakes could not be higher. The decisions made in that room today will shape the future of more than 2 million people living in one of the most devastated territories on Earth. Israel's foreign minister is in Washington representing the Israeli government at this summit. In remarks delivered ahead of the meeting, he outlined Israel's core position clearly and without ambiguity. Israel supports the Trump plan, he said, but that support is built on 3 non-negotiable pillars: the complete disarmament of Hamas, the full demilitarization of the Gaza Strip, and a fundamental transformation of the political and educational environment that has allowed extremism to take root and flourish in Gaza for decades. Without these 3 conditions being met, he argued, no reconstruction effort, no matter how well-funded or well-intentioned, will produce lasting peace or genuine stability. Meanwhile, a new investigative report suggests that the Trump administration is considering the construction of a large-scale American military base inside the Gaza Strip. According to this report, the base would cover approximately 90 acres and would be capable of housing up to 5,000 military personnel. The force stationed there, described as an international stabilization force, would be tasked with overseeing the disarmament process, maintaining security on the ground, and preventing a return to the conditions that made October 7th possible. At the same time, Reuters is reporting that Hamas is actively attempting to insert itself into whatever technocratic governing structure emerges for post-war Gaza, seeking to preserve its political influence even as its military capabilities are degraded. This development underscores the central challenge facing everyone involved in this process. How do you rebuild a territory when the organization that caused its destruction is still maneuvering to remain relevant? Joining me now to break all of this down are 2 guests whose experience and insight speak for themselves. Ambassador Alan Baker served as Israel's ambassador to Canada and has decades of experience in international law and diplomacy. Brigadier General Relic Shafir is a former IDF Air Force base commander with deep operational expertise. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. On the question of whether negotiations with Iran were ever going to succeed, Ambassador Baker offered a measured but clear-eyed assessment. Diplomacy, he argued, must always be attempted before force can be legitimately justified. President Trump, he suggested, understands this, both as a matter of principle and as a matter of strategic positioning. By exhausting every diplomatic avenue first, the United States places itself in a far stronger position before the international community if and when military action becomes necessary. It can say truthfully that it tried everything. Ambassador Baker also noted that Iran's public declarations should be read as negotiating posture rather than fixed policy, standard behavior for a nation seeking to establish its position before making any concessions. Brigadier General Shafir offered a deeper historical lens. He traced Iran's current strategic mindset back to the ideological transformation that took place following the 1979 revolution, and further still, to the ancient Battle of Karbala in the 7th century, which holds profound significance in Shia Islamic tradition. He argued that Iran's leadership has internalized a worldview in which defiance, even in the face of certain military defeat, is preferable to capitulation. This, he suggested, makes traditional deterrence logic less reliable when applied to Tehran. Both sides, he implied, may already know how a military confrontation would end, and yet the confrontation may happen anyway. On the question of Israel's readiness for a potential Iranian counterstrike, the Brigadier General expressed cautious confidence. Israeli pilots and intelligence personnel now have direct operational experience of Iranian missile systems, launch positions, and tactical behavior under fire. This knowledge, he argued, would enable Israeli and American strike forces to neutralize Iranian launch capabilities before they can be fully deployed. He did note that no outcome can be guaranteed and that the Israeli public should be prepared for the possibility of incoming fire. But he expressed the belief that the damage would be significantly more limited than in previous exchanges. On the question of timing, whether a strike is actually coming, and if so, when, the 2 guests diverged somewhat. Ambassador Baker urged against alarm, noting that even the most well-informed experts cannot predict the precise moment such decisions are made. He spoke from personal experience, having lived through multiple conflicts and counseled calm. Brigadier General Shafir was more direct. If forced to make a prediction, he said he would bet on a limited military operation occurring within the coming week. He cited the completion of American and Israeli military readiness cycles, the collapse of diplomatic talks, the outcome of the Washington summit, and even meteorological conditions as factors that appear to be converging toward action. Turning to Gaza and the Board of Peace, both guests grappled with the central tension at the heart of the summit, the gap between what Israel wants and what the United States appears prepared to deliver. Ambassador Baker emphasized that the Trump plan itself contains explicit language requiring Israeli security approval before key milestones can be reached, giving Israel meaningful leverage in the process. He also raised the deeply problematic issue of the Palestinian Authority, an entity that Israel is deeply skeptical of, in part because it continues to operate a policy of financial payments to individuals convicted of violence against Israelis. Bringing the Palestinian Authority into a governing role in Gaza, he argued, requires serious scrutiny. Brigadier General Shafir was more blunt about Israel's current position. He argued that Israel lacks real leverage in Washington at this moment, and that the United States is likely to press ahead with reconstruction before Hamas is fully disarmed, because that is the sequencing that the Trump administration believes is operationally and politically feasible. He predicted that Hamas will be absorbed in some form into a restructured Palestinian Authority that will govern Gaza under American and Arab supervision. He pointed to the precedent of the ceasefire and hostage deal in which American envoys drove the process and Israel followed. He suggested that pattern is likely to continue. On the question of Gazan public opinion, the Brigadier General offered a perhaps surprising data point. Hamas currently enjoys the support of only around 30% of the population in Gaza and is actually more popular in the West Bank than in the territory it has governed for nearly 2 decades. Most Gazans, he argued, are not ideologically committed to Hamas. They are exhausted, they have lost everything, and they want a future. A governing authority backed by the United States, the Arab League, and the broader international community, one that can deliver reconstruction, services, and economic opportunity, could, over time, earn genuine legitimacy. Both guests closed with a shared theme: hope, grounded in realism. Ambassador Baker expressed confidence that the United States and Israel share the same ultimate objectives, even if they differ on pace and method. Brigadier General Shafir argued that the single most important variable in Gaza's long-term future is whether ordinary Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank can be given a credible, tangible sense of hope. Without that, he warned, no military operation, no stabilization force, and no reconstruction program will be enough to prevent the next generation from returning to violence. Before we wrap up, the Israeli Defense Forces have confirmed the demolition of the home belonging to the individual responsible for the November 2025 Gilo Junction attack, in which a 71-year-old Israeli civilian was killed in a car ramming and stabbing incident. The demolition was carried out as part of Israel's standard policy of holding perpetrators of terror attacks accountable beyond the act itself. Thank you for watching. We will see you at the top of the next hour.